everyone. This episode of Escape the Clock is a little different. What you're about to hear was recorded live at CampFI Southeast in front of a room full of people who are all on the same journey that you are. Financial independence, intentional living, and building a life on their own terms. I had the chance to sit down with one of the attendees, a woman named Renee, who has quietly built something most people would call impossible. Not because she out-earned the problem, but because she out-thought it. She has no book, no brand, nothing to sell. This was just a real conversation about what it actually looks like to live with intention and what that can buy you in the long run. I think you'll find something in this one regardless of where you are on the path. So let's jump right in.
Welcome back to Escape the Clock, the show where we highlight strategies and approaches for achieving financial freedom and having the option not to work. I'm your host, Daniel C. Rogers. Spending is a common part of life, yet it's one of the most challenging. According to a 2025 study, 44% of Americans earning more than $100,000 a year report living paycheck to paycheck, providing that lifestyle creep can outpace even a six-figure salary. Many wonder, where did all that money go? For those seeking financial independence, that question has been answered. The only reason to live paycheck to paycheck is a choice to sacrifice away everything possible to reach that FI goal quicker. But the myth is to stop spending on everything you love and that the math will eventually grant you the permission to quit. But the reality is that leaning too hard on frugality can actually compromise the very life we are trying to save. A 2024 study found that 47% of millennials are so focused on their milestones that they are actively reducing spending on necessary items just to hit their goals. Yet, with balance, you can sacrifice the right items while maintaining spending on the things that bring you joy in your life. Control, not sacrifice. And today's special guest is joining us right here at CampFI Southeast to explain how. Today, we are joined by Renee Hardy, a frugality expert who believes money is less about restriction and more about intentional living. Renee lives by a simple philosophy where frugality isn't about deprivation, but rather a way to design a life where your money works for you instead of the other way around. Renee, welcome to Escape the Clock.
Thank you for having me, Dan.
Awesome. Excited for this conversation. We have not yet done this on the show. We've covered like almost everything else. So I'd love for you to take us back to a moment when you first recognized that frugal spending was actually a valid thing to do.
Yeah, so I won't lie in that I believe I came out of the womb with the frugal mindset. I think my brain was just wired to be the most efficient with a lot of my thought processes and everything. And so just money just kind of fell into that. My mom definitely instilled in me early on a frugal mindset by getting all of my clothes from garage sales in town. So we had our keen eye on all the girls that were about a grade ahead of me, and we would always visit their garage sales and pick up all of their clothes, and that's where we got all of our school clothes and stuff. And you know, I mean, back then everything sold for 25 cents a piece, but that's what happened. And I saw, you know, I was able to get, you know, 5 or 6 pairs of jeans where my friends would only get 1 pair, you know, for the same amount of money.
Gotcha. So this was kind of part of how your parents were intentionally raising you, or do you kind of feel like this was a necessity in your life?
So my parents didn't really talk a lot about money. It was more just, we don't have a lot, so this is what we're doing. We never really discussed it, but I think they did it out of a little bit of both, out of a little bit of necessity, but also they would like their dollar to go further than where it could, and it was part of the culture in my small town in central Illinois.
How was the vibe in the house? Was there excitement on a deal, or were you kind of like chasing the tags?
Definitely there was, I think one of the things that always came out of my mom's mouth, at least, was when she would tell me how much, or she would show me some things that she got. She'd be like, guess how much it was, right? So really just proud of her deal. I do. If someone shows an interest in maybe what I'm wearing, absolutely. I'll be like, yep, $3 at Goodwill, you know, something to that effect. So yeah, it's definitely a pride moment in finding a good deal for me.
Yeah, it can be gamified too.
Yeah, for sure.
48% of Americans report being more stressed heading into 2026 than they were in 2025. So more stress this year than ever before, primarily due to just rising prices. Expenses are up. It's just your money doesn't go quite as far. Are you finding that to be true in your life, or is the way that you find deals and spend helping you manage that?
So my philosophy is very much to spend on needs, not wants. So yes, we have seen the needs, groceries, gas, things like that have increased. So I think that's just a sign of the times. There's nothing we can really do much about that. But as far as the wants, I feel like we haven't seen as much of a hit because we don't spend as much money on a lot of the wants.
So you haven't given up eggs?
We haven't given up eggs. No. But we have, changed a little bit around to try to be a little bit more frugal with the groceries. So instead of perhaps the free range eggs, maybe getting the slightly cheaper version.
I'm curious how you see this lifestyle versus maybe like minimalism, which was quite popular for quite a while. Do you see yourself as a minimalist?
Yeah, absolutely. Minimalism, when that whole concept came out and became really, really popular way back in 2015 or so, I remember hearing about that and being like, yes, that is the answer to just really focus your spending on things that really matter to you. I mean, forget about what everybody else is spending their money on. What is the thing that's going to make you the happiest? What's going to bring you the most value? What brings you the most joy in your life, and focus on those things. So I think if you were to come over to my house, we definitely don't have a lot of wall decorations. We don't have a lot of tchotchkes hanging around the house. That's not really what we value in our lives. So we spend the money more on experiences or on the necessities.
Is that teachable?
I think so. I like to think so, that it absolutely is. I do have two children. They're 11 and 14. And from the beginning, we really tried to instill in them the whole minimalism attitude, starting, I think, with, probably their birthday parties. I think those were some of the early times when, I would send out the birthday invitations to all of his classmates that would come, and I would say, no gifts, please. No gifts. It definitely riled a couple of feathers with a lot of the other parents because they just didn't understand, but we definitely didn't need 20 Lego sets hanging around the house.
That can be hard with grandparents in particular.
Yeah. And with my parents, yes. My parents, we all know grandparents love to spoil their grandkids, lavish them with lots of gifts and stuff, and I had to put the kibosh on that as well. Ruffled my parents' feathers as well, but they got the message after a little while and realized, what we were trying to do. And when I tried to explain to them, the psychology of having so many toys and being surrounded as a child with so many things, and it clutters your brain. It's not good psychologically for the child. Yeah. So I think that they finally caught on after a while.
And it's more stuff to step on.
It's more, definitely.
So you have two kids?
I do,
okay. Yeah. Do they show any distinct differences in this? Do either of them have any type of frugal or minimal kind of signs to them yet?
Yeah, I think that it definitely rubbed off. I mean, from a young age, I would take them to the store, to Walmart, to Target or whatever, and they never asked for things. It's not like every time we went to the store, like, can I get this? Can I get that? Can I get that? And they never really did because they knew that the answer was no, we're not going to do that. That's not a thing. And we watched some of the other parents struggle with that, Kids throwing tantrums because they didn't get something before checkout. But yeah, we didn't do that.
I know a lot of people do struggle with scarcity mindset. I did too. I grew up in poverty, so the idea that I could go back to that was definitely difficult, and it was hard to spend money because of the worry. I do think sometimes frugality gets a bad rap with scarcity, and people kind of conflate these together like, oh, you're sacrificing something So you're not spending. But I don't know, do you see these things as interlocked in a way, or do you think they're distinct?
Yeah, you can certainly go too extreme. Everything's a sliding scale. You can go too extreme with your frugality, where it does become scarcity and it is wrought with fear. I like to think that I focus on getting the value. So being valuable with my money. That doesn't mean that I'm buying the cheapest thing. That doesn't mean that I'm not spending money. It just means that I'm spending money where I'm getting the most value.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I usually call this high utility spending. It's like the return we get in happiness per dollar that we can spend.
Right.
At what point, though, do you think the effort of just saving $1 might cost more than it's worth?
You can certainly go a little too far unplugging all of your electronics before you leave the house, just to save that $5 on electricity.
By the way. I've done that.
I personally don't think that's worth my time to do that. I think my time's a little bit more valuable than doing that exercise. So you certainly can go too far. My threshold might be slightly different than somebody else's threshold, but you gotta know that line for yourself.
There was this Intuit survey in 2026 that said 58% of people prioritize spending on personal joy, but intentionally live frugally during the week to afford their weekend plans.
Oh, okay.
So you're kind of being able to do it this way. What do you think of things like that? Do you have strategies and stuff that you use?
Yeah, for sure. So for instance, people might think that I overspend on my gym membership, right? So I spend $140 a month to go to my CrossFit gym, but I think the value that I'm getting for my health, the fact that I go there 5 days a week at least, and the community and friendships that I get, I find it a very good deal. I realize I could go do the same type of workouts by myself in the park, but I don't feel like I would get as much out of the workouts. So I think that it's money well spent.
There's 5 different types of capital, and I think social, health, money, time. I think you're hitting many of them on that one.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I can see a high ROI for that. Curious, is this something that can be engineered into a life? I'm sure you've learned things that work in your life and that work in your family. But if you were to mentor somebody who wants to optimize their spending, maybe they're having difficulty with their spending, how would you start to help that person?
Well, so for me, I think if you think of just the Pareto principle, where can you make the biggest bang for your buck? So the top items that people spend money on, right? Housing, transportation, those types of things.
Big ones, yeah.
So, it's one thing to tell people, just, shop at Costco, to save money or whatever. But Costco is a bulk store. And in order for you to get a really good deal at Costco, you got to buy things in bulk. And then you got to have a place to store that, which means you have to have a bigger house or a bigger garage. And are you really saving money by buying the bigger house just to get the cheaper groceries? No, you're not. Buy a smaller house and then, shop maybe more often. You can still shop at Aldi or wherever you need to go, but it's thinking more strategically from that point of view and thinking where can you get the biggest bang for your buck. Similarly with cars. I drive a 2007 Dodge Caliber that I've had forever, and it doesn't have AC.
Wow.
It doesn't have AC, doesn't have a radio anymore. There's some other things that are starting to go wrong. All the siding is peeling off of it, whatever. But you know what? It still gets me from A to B. It still works. There's no reason for me to go out and buy a new car because that'll just take away another, $20,000 out of my brokerage account that I need for later.
It's less than a landfill too.
Yeah, for sure.
How do you measure that you're actually getting happiness out of how you're spending? How do you know? Do you regret any of your spending?
I don't regret spending. I don't like spending for sure. It definitely pains me when I have to actually fork over money to purchase something, but I do know it's a necessity. I think my husband has helped a little bit. He's a little bit more loose with the money. So I think he's brought a little bit of balance in that way, and instead of being a little on that sliding scale, right? I can be a little bit more too saving and he can be a little too spending, but together we might balance each other out a little.
So what types of things make him happy when he's spending versus what makes you happy?
He definitely goes for the short-term joy, happiness, in the moment types of purchases. I definitely get happiness out of longer term, lots of research, making sure that I'm absolutely positive this is the right purchase before I make the purchase. That definitely gives me a lot of joy.
Have you struggled with the balance between how he spends and how you spend? Is this an area that takes a lot of communication? Like, how do you maintain that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's always a bit of a negotiation when you have to share your life with somebody. I think we do a really good job at compromising, but there's a lot of discussion that has to happen. We try to make rules, right? We try to say, okay, anything over this or anything less than this, or, anytime we go searching for this type of thing, we need to stay within these boundaries and stuff. But in the moment, there's always but what about this? But what about that? So it's just a constant communication that we have to, communication and a negotiation and a respect for each other, that neither way to live is necessarily wrong. It's just, this is how I want to live, this is how you want to live, and to make sure that each one is being heard, and then we have to kind of, like I said, do that negotiation.
But when the kids want something, do they go to dad?
My husband and I have definitely, from the beginning, tried to be a unit. So we don't pit against each other. The children know that. Do they ask him first, though? Maybe. They might ask him first. They know they have to ask both of us, but they might ask him first and then say, Dad already said yes. Or Dad said, ask your mom.
Well, I find there needs to be a healthy amount of fear in the relationship, too. With your husband, is there behaviors that you noticed he brought into the relationship that have kind of changed over time? How much of how you live has changed the way he spends and vice versa?
Oh yeah, for sure. Like I said, we've both brought each other a little closer to the center. I'm still fully on this side, he's still fully on this side. But I mean, when I met him, he regularly was having his electricity turned off because he would spend his electricity bill money on whatever he wanted to do that weekend, and he just wasn't good with the organizational skills. Whereas I think was a little too much of the saving, and I wasn't spending, and I wasn't going and doing things, having experiences, those types of things. And so, he's rubbed off on me a little bit, being able to let loose a little bit more. And I certainly have brought him more to the saving side for sure. So
what's a thing that both of you would never spend on? And what's something you'd be excited to go and spend on?
I think something we would never spend on is probably just really expensive, nice furniture or something for the house. I don't know. I don't think either one of us really value any of that type of thing. Something that we would both really like to spend on is, I think, experiences, travel to someplace with the family where we could just let loose for, 2 weeks or something. I think we would both be into that.
If you had a huge windfall of money come your way, money was no longer an object forever.
Oh, okay.
How do you think that would change the way you live?
Yeah, that's a really great question, because I like to think that really wouldn't change the way that I live very much. I wouldn't go buy a mansion. I would still live in a...
Would you get a new car?
Perhaps I would get a new car, but it would be like a Toyota Corolla or a Honda Civic.
With AC.
Yeah, with AC and a Honda Civic. It wouldn't be a Mercedes, and it wouldn't, I'd still live in a, 3-bedroom, 2-bath home, something very reasonable.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't live a lavish lifestyle. It doesn't fit with my values.
So times are changing. 42% of young adults report feeling comfortable to say no and decline a social activity and let their friends know they just can't afford it. And so it's becoming more common and normal just to say sorry.
things are expensive. So I'm curious how you navigate any potential relational frictions that you might see in your life when it comes to the pursuit of your goals. Because I know you're striving for an FI goal,
Yep.
and that takes some sacrifice. Sounds like your husband is interested to spend a little bit. What do you find it easy to say no?
So I am 48 years old. I have no problem telling people no these days. I mean, if you want to be upset about that, you can be upset about that. That's your problem. But yeah, I don't have a problem saying no, we can't do that. But one thing that I do like to tell people is if I do say no to something, I don't like to tell them, no, we can't afford it. Because obviously we can.
Language. Yeah.
We can afford it.
Sure.
Right? But we're choosing not to.
That's good.
We're choosing not to spend our money on that. Instead, we're choosing to spend our money here. I could see how it could be a little more difficult, though, if you were younger and weren't used to telling people no a lot and didn't have that confidence to do so, that it could be a bit of a struggle. But I'm really happy to hear that it's becoming more normal for people to go ahead and say that. Yeah. So I think that's great.
Was there ever a time in your life you felt like you kind of went with the flow and spent money just because you felt like you were supposed to?
I don't think so. That's
impressive.
That does not sound like me at all. I think not. I think I've always been, I guess, a rebel in that respect, or a trailblazer maybe. I don't know.
I'm curious what your big tips are for people because you've been doing this. Do you have kind of like your top of mind go-to things? Like you want to save money today, you really need to be doing X, Y, and Z?
Yeah. I'll go back to what I said before. Don't buy as big a house as you think you need.
That's a good
okay? Like, honestly, I know that people are like, well, we have 2 kids, therefore we have to have a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house because they each need their own room. So I'll tell you right now, my kids are 11 and 14. They still share a bedroom. We have a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house, but that wasn't always the case. We always did try to live a little bit more frugally for about a year. We did live in a 1-bedroom, 1-bath apartment that was 470 square feet for all 4 of us. And it was great. I'll tell you, it was in downtown Cocoa Village, and it was such a walkable neighborhood, and we went out every day to the park, and there were restaurants, everything, and we had a blast living in that place. We transferred to Boston for a job, and when we got up there, we also tried to do the 1-bedroom, 1-bath thing to just keep that going. However, Massachusetts has a rule that if you have 4 people, can't rent a 1-bedroom apartment. So we had to rent a 2-bedroom apartment. So we did 2 bedrooms, 2 baths. I know. So it was 2 bedrooms, 2 baths, but we could have bought something large. We could have, because and nobody would have thought different of us, because that's what everybody does.
Yep.
But we definitely stayed smaller. So we got a 900 square foot townhome, 2-bedroom, 2-bath. We even had people come visit us. We got a Murphy bed that we installed in the living room so that when people came to visit, we could bring the Murphy bed down. Had the big curtains that went across so they had their own space. People came to visit us all the time, and it was not a problem. I think people buy bigger houses, bigger cars, bigger things, because just in case, or for that once a year that family comes to visit, they need a room to stay in. Really? Do they? Yeah. What about the other 364 days of the year that room stays empty, and you're heating it and cooling it and cleaning it and all those things, and takes up all that space. So stay small. Yeah. I think that's my advice.
Speaking of younger people again for a moment, there was New Year's resolutions polled, and Gen Z and millennials, 56% of Gen Z, 63% millennials said that their New Year's resolution in 2026 was just to save more money. They just wanted to spend less, save more. Now, you might argue that's a necessity for them, but I am curious how you think of modeling for generations, because it is getting harder, is becoming more and more difficult. And yeah, there's great platforms and tricks and tips and things that we can provide people. But do you see this as a necessary way of living for more people as a common part of life, or is this a choice?
So I might say something a little controversial, but this is, if I were to go back and be, 20 years old again, I do think that there's some sort of lore out there that you have to have your own place. right? So yes, if you go out and you're 20 years old and you're like, oh, I'm gonna get a 1-bedroom, 1-bath place, it's the smallest thing, and the rent is $2,500, you know what? If you actually found 2 other friends and got a 3-bedroom place, hey, maybe now you're only spending $800 a month. And I don't know where we decided that we didn't need roommates anymore.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's like people need their own space and they think that's what they need and they deserve, instead of like, I remember I had roommates and that's how I saved money. And if I needed to save more money, I got another roommate and then we all split the cost. I think that's kind of where I wish that there was more community and more sharing, because I think there's enough for everybody and there's just not enough sharing going on.
Yeah. Is there anything that, if you had a magic wand, you would do it to change? And it could be society. I mean, part of that is a societal change, is what you're talking about. Would it be something in a systematic level with kind of the keeping up culture that we live in? Like, what is it that we need to think about at a root level here?
Back in 2015, I did try to build a tiny house community. I got legislation passed in my town, got the land all set, was ready to build on it, and then I hit a roadblock that I couldn't overcome. But the vision was that there would be this community that maybe would have like one tool shed in the middle, and that's where all the things would be. And house number 1 would own the lawnmower, and house number 2 would own the ladder, and house number 3 would do this. But it would be the community shed, and everybody would share things. And so to me, that's a way to save money, still have access to the things that you need, the ladder that you need to use twice a year, that now everybody has in their garage their own ladder, instead of having the community ladder that was purchased by one family and the community lawnmower and whatever. So I think that if we learned how to share a little bit more, I think that our dollars would stretch further. If I had a magic wand, that would certainly be where I would take things, is to build more community, have more sharing. Yeah, that's how it would be.
I've never ever said anything positive about Facebook before, but I will say the free share.
Free cycle,
Yeah, the free cycle is amazing. I mean, people are just giving stuff to each other, helping each other out all the time, and leave it on a porch. It's like help you out, and it does create community for sure.
Yeah, so. I love that. That was really strong in Massachusetts when I was there. I mean, the whole town of Westboro was very into the free cycle, whatever. We would regularly get stuff and regularly give it away. So
it's amazing.
Yeah.
One last question for you as we wrap up here, but is there anything you would change about your frugality or how you're living today? I know it's an introspective question, and I can see like you're really proud of the person you are and you're doing great with this, you're making it to your goals. But if you could change something about yourself on this, would you?
Something about the spending of the money. Trying to think. I mean, I don't like spending money. I know I have to spend it as a necessity. Is there anything that I would change about it?
Like being able to enjoy spending on other types of things you can't find joy in spending on?
I don't know. I feel like I'm pretty discerning with my purchases.
You don't have guilt or anything about it?
I don't have guilt.
That's amazing.
Yeah, no guilt about it. I mean, everything that I buy is thoroughly researched. So yeah, I don't think I would change anything except just be more optimal at it if I possibly could.
You think there's room left to be more optimal?
Yeah, there certainly is. I mean, I know that I trade off some things for my time, right? I mean, in order to be as optimal as possible, like you would have to, so think about like the points game, right? A lot of people play the points game. It's a very frugal way to travel. But it involves a lot of time, effort, energy. It's almost a part-time job in itself. I definitely dabble in it. I have a credit card. We run all of our purchases through it. We have the points. We use them. But I definitely don't optimize that for sure because it's, I don't find the amount of effort and time worth the amount of value that I'm going to get out of those.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Renee. I appreciate you being on the show.
Yeah, you're welcome, Dan. Thank you for having me.
All right. Thank you.
to thank Renee for taking the time to put herself out there and chat with me in front of everyone. What you just heard was not a polished expert pitch from someone with a book to sell. It was a real conversation with a real person recorded in front of a live audience at CampFI Southeast. And that is exactly what made it so valuable. Renee is not famous. She doesn't have a platform or a brand. She's a wife and a mother of two, who quietly built a life that most people would call impossible. From a family of four living in a 470 square foot apartment to someone with enough wealth that she doesn't have to stress about her financial future. There was a lot to take away from this conversation. We can't avoid spending money. That's part of living. But there is a difference between being cheap and being intentional, and Renee made that clear. The secret is not to avoid spending. It's to spend where you get the most return. Health, time, money, social connection. Aligning our spending with maximizing these types of capital can help us live a regret-free life, at least when it comes to how we spend our hard-earned money. That $140 gym membership is a perfect example. On the surface, it looks like a luxury. There are so many ways to accomplish a workout. But for Renee, it was much more than that. The gym is a community where she connects with others, an investment in her overall well-being. An unused gym membership might be a splurge that becomes a leak, but for Renee, it's a high-utility investment. And knowing the difference, that's the entire game. Renee grew up modestly and held on to that as part of her core values. Because of that, she was able to control the scale of her life, preventing leaks from happening. So we live in a culture that tells us we need more space, a newer car, a full closet, and a separate room for each kid. And so it's normalized to buy more, store more, insure more, clean more, and work more to pay for it all. But that pushes the finish line for financial independence further away. As of July 2025, annual home ownership costs for a median-priced home consumed 47% of median household income. This cost has climbed, exceeding the peaks we saw before the 2008 financial crisis. And when we live in a keep-up society, it makes sense why people lean on borrowing. Everyone pitches goods and services, and the prices of these things just keep going up. But if we say yes by default, there's nothing left for the future. Renee has a no by default mindset. When she says no, she explains that it isn't because she can't afford it. That would be just a lame excuse. It's an intentional choice that she's making, focusing that money toward her freedom. It's a deliberate mindset. And unlike income or opportunity, it doesn't require anything but a decision. Take Renee and her husband, for example. They are opposites when it comes to their natural tendencies to spend and save. She described him as spontaneous. She, on the other hand, is the planner. Rather than letting that become a source of resentment, they built a system around it. Spending limits, rules, open communication, and a genuine acceptance that both approaches have merit. When she met him, he couldn't even keep the electricity on. She taught him the tools to organize himself financially, and he taught her the value of getting out and actually spending on life. That is not a compromise where both people lose. That's a partnership where both people grow. For anyone navigating a financial independence journey with a partner who does not share their exact same relationship with money, that's the lesson. You do not need to be identical. You just need to be aligned on the goal, honest about the friction, and willing to make room for each other's version of enough. So, if you take one thing away, I hope it's this. Minimalism is the vision. Frugality is how you protect it, just like Renee. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Renee. If you have an interesting money story and you would like to share it with the Escape the Clock audience, reach out to me at contact@escapetheclock.com with the subject line, Case Study. I'm Daniel C. Rogers. Thanks for listening, and best of luck right-sizing your life and escaping the clock. I'll catch you next week.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate that. First time I've ever done that in front of anybody.
That's a wrap on this episode of Escape the Clock. Everything you've heard today is for educational purposes only, designed to help you think, plan, and build a stronger financial program. Take what resonates, bring it into your Escape the Clock plan, and review it with a qualified professional before making any major moves. The book, the free planner, and the one-on-one time with me are all waiting for you at escapetheclock.com. If this episode was valuable, please leave a rating, share it with someone who needs to hear it. I'll catch you next week.